Hello. In this series entitled Karma, Destiny and Choice, we will be looking at the somewhat controversial subject as to whether conflict is inevitable or not. It is my pleasure to be interviewing Sister Denise from the Brahma Kumaris in this series. Welcome back.
Thank you, Magla. Hello.
Hello. This is a somewhat painful subject, Sister Denise, because I don't think human beings are naturally designed or primed for conflict, and yet it's everywhere.
Coming into conflict, conflict of opinion, difference of opinion, having to negotiate things, I think is actually healthy, but what people don't know is how to resolve conflict. So to me, conflict is a given. It's not necessarily bad. People think it's bad because of how it plays out. But I think if we look at it a bit more deeply, it's in a way a bit neutral, but it's definitely deeply and intimately connected with karma philosophy.
What comes to mind is that if you look at the pattern of humanity, practically everything and everyone starts off whole, and then there's a split and a split and another split. And people have asked the question, why can't couples stay together? Why can't families remain whole until death? Why isn't there unity amongst people of the same country, the same nation? Why is there an I and you, or rather a we and them? Why is there this bifurcation? What causes it?
What causes it is time.
Okay, I did not expect that answer. I thought force of evil, I was expecting that, but time?
Take an amoeba.
We're going that basic. Take an amoeba.
Take an amoeba, it exists, it grows. It reaches a certain size, the nucleus splits in two, you get two amoeba, and then four, and etc., etc. Things in nature are designed this way. Take a plant. Any plant, there'll be a shoot going up and a root going down. And the shoot has two cotyledons, always, which are made from the seed. And this is where it gets high quality protein to get it going. And then a leaf or two comes and it branches, and those branch. So it's absolutely part of nature. Take a road going from A to B. Pretty soon you'll find a fork in the road and it branches, or a crossroad. And it's just the nature of life to be going this way and then that way or the other way. And even in the journey of your life, you're all the time coming across crossroads. Should I go this way? Should I go that way? Is this right? Is that right? You asked initially about why couples can't stay together, why there can't be unity and so on. And this is a different thing. The law of karma is such that what draws people together, this magnetic force of karma draws people together because there's an outstanding debt which will cause them to split. And so there's split upon split upon split. Another element to bring into the equation is polarization. What we have in the world at the moment is polarity between men and women, north and south, east and west, rich and poor, desert and green, rain and no rain. Everything is going to its extremes. And this is a state of absolute imbalance, which is what we're experiencing the world over. And the result of time.
Can one avoid conflict? Can one avoid confrontation? what if you're an individual who is not a person who looks for conflict but seems to be surrounded by it?
Let us take up the theme of the Mahabharata war and the Bhagavad Gita, which we looked at in another series, and we see the whole thing is about whether or not to avoid conflict. And eventually Arjuna, the hero of the story of the Gita, accepts that he must engage in conflict, but otherwise his arguments against conflict are that you cannot engage in conflict with your relatives because it's immoral. This story exemplifies the big dilemma around conflict. One is that the person that you have to kill in the conflict is your brother, but the other thing is that they did some negative action which requires you to kill them. And so either you see what they did or who they are. And this flip-flop between who they are and what they did is what creates confusion in the mind of Arjuna. But the final conclusion is that playing out the process of conflict was required and inevitable.
How does one maintain one's dignity when you're in a situation of conflict? I'm referring to personal relationships as well as family conflict, as well as colleagues, community, country. How do you sail through with minimum scarring?
Well, the ideal is to negotiate, because one side has one position, the other side has another position, and you want to arrive at a middle way where all parties are happy, and we call that consensus. But very often people find themselves going for compromise, which doesn't really work because the seeds of the conflict are still there, they haven't been worked out. Arriving at consensus requires a great deal of skill and a great deal of willingness on the part of the opposing sides. And in most cases, they eventually agree to differ, which may end up in violent conflict, but the world is absolutely surrounded by conflict situations, and this is adding to the negative energy that we're living in. So it is an issue.
Body consciousness versus soul consciousness. Tell us how that comes into play here within the subject of conflict, under the banner of conflict.
Yes. Again, I think I will make a reference to the Bhagavad Gita, which talks about when a person is under the influence of sense perception, it moves from attraction to attachment to what you are trying to possess being denied to you, which produces anger, and which eventually results in loss of intelligence. So conflict occurs together with loss of intelligence, and intelligence, deep understanding, deep wisdom enables us to arrive at consensus. And I think that when we're in conflict situations, we're very often also in a paradoxical situation. We talked about paradox in an earlier episode. I think the situation of conflict is inevitable, but whether it ends up as violent conflict is not inevitable, because there is the possibility of negotiation and arriving at consensus. But circumstances, especially where there is an outstanding karmic account, it will lead to conflict. And then if you can work out the karmic account, then the conflict is resolved.
It is quite common in situations of conflict to encounter people who are angry, aggressive, violent. There's an escalation. And how does one deal with these strong emotions? Firstly, within yourself, and secondly, from others.
Well, it's very difficult to deal with them, because when somebody's operating on the basis of anger and obstinacy, and they will not budge from their position, you can't negotiate. And so then you can only resolve it by violent conflict. Or you take the person to court and you have a lawsuit which results in a lot of expenses and a lot of loss, and a judgment that they have to accept, but which may not, in terms of their feelings, may not make the conflict go away at all. So it's a very difficult situation when people are operating on the basis of strong negative emotions. So the key from the point of view of meditation, spirituality, is that conflict can be resolved through deep meditation, practice of spirituality, etc., but very few people will do that.
Effective communication plays a huge role in resolving conflict, does it not?
It does.
That's the problem. Most individuals are not effective communicators. Assertiveness is a skill that is rare.
Very much so, and ideally education in this would be available through the television, through the education system, but I think it's not. If you want to learn effective communication, you have to really study and research and so on, and that's a lot of work, but of course it's a very good investment.
In yourself.
It's a very good investment in yourself and in your relationships. And I think part of the, I'm interested in the convergence of spirituality and psychology, and effective communication, I think, is connected with psychology and, good interpersonal skills. So people who have this are ahead in all kinds of situations, and there is a lot of attention given to this in Germany, but that material hasn't been translated into English, so the English-speaking world is not able to take advantage of this.
The skills that one needs to navigate through conflict, to come to an amicable solution, what would you say they are? And I'm thinking about how one minimizes a karmic backlash from the conflict.
One thing that's very difficult to put your finger on is what was the karma that brought you into conflict in the first place, because it would have been some other lifetime. If it's right here, right now, it's much easier to negotiate, but a lot of it is from another time. So when you meditate and you study the philosophy of karma, you are able to intuit that what's going on here is a karmic account. And the meaning of a karmic account is what it looks like. This one wronged this one may not be exactly what it is, because this one doing something against that one might well be an equalizing of the debt.
So what you are saying is, in this scenario where there's a victim and a perpetrator, what most probably transpired is that those two were in the opposite roles in a previous lifetime.
Exactly. That's right. But you can't prove it because you can't go back into another life. all you can look at is what's really going on here, but that may not resolve the situation at all. And so if you bring in the spiritual dimension and try to intuit what are the energies going on here, and also if you look at the sanskaras, how this situation came up, then you would be in a better position to talk about the conflict, and it's possible through that, if all parties are willing to accept that this could be a karmic account coming up for settlement, then you can bring that into the negotiation and potentially arrive at resolution and reconciliation.
I'm listening to you, and I find that you are so cool, calm, and collected about all of this. Whereas when one is in a situation of conflict, you're hot-headed, angry, hurt, feel betrayed, battling with feelings of revenge, and that is just some of the negative traits that come up. It is usually a host of negative thoughts and emotions that volcanically erupt. In a situation of conflict, people hurt each other very badly.
They do. They destroy each other, and if the conflict is a fight until death, they may again switch roles, and something will trigger the continuation of that conflict, but they will not remember that it's a continuation of an old conflict. They will just think it's a new thing. So this is why it's quite good to have a good understanding of reincarnation and the laws of karma. You know what happens where in a war situation you have this nation against that nation, you get a lot of casualties on both sides. They all reincarnate, quite often in the opposite side, and so the thing gets very complicated, and every so often it'll erupt, and every eruption is an escalation. So the question of, is conflict unavoidable? I think in looking at the circumstances together with the law, I think the law of karma, that is, I think we would say that it is inevitable and that it's escalating, and then the question arises, how do I manage in a world where conflict on every level is escalating? It's all around me, but will I get caught in the fire of it, and will I get caught in a conflict situation, or can I stand aside?
For those who are spiritually inclined, keeping the peace is part of their character. Not all, but a significant amount. Is there something wrong in being a peacekeeper, wanting to maintain harmony, saying, listen, I can see an argument about to erupt, let's not argue about this?
No, I think that's a very, very good thing. But at the same time, there are also people who get in front of conflict situations and they try to prevent the conflict, and they end up where the conflicting people focus on that one. They become the victim.
So your message is proceed with caution.
Definitely proceed with caution, and if you want to be an arbitrator, you better be expert, because otherwise you're very likely to be the object of the aggression.
Within spirituality, non-violence comes up quite often, does it not? How does non-violence fit into this picture?
Conflict and non-violence are not necessarily opposite of each other.
It's not?
Not necessarily. In spirituality, when you want to practice non-violence, it's not really about avoiding getting into a fight with another human being. It's more to do with your interaction with people from your side should not involve, like, for example, if you're vegetarian, because you don't want to be killing or responsible for killing animals or other creatures. When it comes to a conflict situation, it's a situation of disagreement. The conflict situation that's described in the Gita is an interesting one, because the person has to engage in conflict because it becomes their social and moral duty to fight. And the duty of a king is to protect his people, and so he has to be prepared to fight in a situation where his people are under threat. So their conflict and non-violence are sort of at odds with each other. You need to be able to use force correctly when necessary. I was not long ago called by the military and police in one of the Asian countries to talk to the young men who were on the front line in an ongoing conflict at this present time. And their question to me was, what happens to my soul when I kill someone?
And what was your answer?
My answer was this, that you are in the military, you are protecting your country, and you have a duty to kill in a conflict situation. And you know anatomy, you're trained in the use of weapons, and you need to be so expert that you kill a person without or by causing the minimum suffering. It should be death on impact, so that you don't hurt the person or the minimum amount. And if you have to wound, then wound the person to stop them in such a part of the body that's minimum damage. And if you want to make them afraid, you shoot in such a way as to make them afraid, but you don't do damage. And the problem which happens in a war situation is when a person gets into a frenzy of cruelty and they do some action which is gratuitously violent, and then something bad is going to happen to your soul, definitely. But if you are shooting accurately in the line of duty and properly, then you're fine, because it is your duty, karmic duty, to protect your country.
Sure.
And the military authorities were also very happy with this, because the problem is, when you're on the battlefield physically, it is chaos, it is very scary, and I also told them you have to be brave, because if you're cowardly and you break ranks and this and that, you put all your brothers in danger. So you need to be accurate, you need to be brave, you are warriors, so there's a code for warriors, and you need to be expert in that, and if you meditate, it's going to help you.
Wow, I never knew that one can share the law of karma with soldiers.
They're people.
I thought that they're doomed because war is a doomed scenario, but that was actually quite enlightening. Thank you. We have to say cheers to you right now. This has been a very in-depth and fascinating discussion as to how one has to face what is inevitable for a lot of people, the subject of conflict. So there you go. Sister Denise has touched certain aspects, like whether conflict is avoidable or not, how to conduct oneself with dignity throughout, and how to maintain a spiritual awareness when one is in a position of conflict, and most importantly, how not to create further karma when one is faced with conflict. So thank you so much for joining us. I do hope that you have learned something that you could use in your life. Take care and goodbye.